Welcome back, Knuckleheads. I am Lupine Fiasco. This is Daily FaB Gameplay, and today we are playing the Kayo Mirror. For anyone who is new to the channel, welcome to the jungle. What we do here is review replays of games that I played on the Talishar client days or weeks ago, after enough time has passed that I lose my bias and can more objectively judge the quality of my play. I'll talk through turn cycles and give my thoughts on the line I would take now compared to the line I took then at the time of recording. We either learn from my mistakes or reinforce good play patterns with the overall goal of tightening and optimizing our gameplay in the future to take down paper events like the upcoming ProQuest season and, most importantly, walk away with that shiny cardboard. If you'd like to check out the list I'm playing here or try it for yourself on Talishar, there is a FaB deck link in the video description below. While you're down there, if you haven't already done so, please consider subscribing to my channel. A YouTube subscription is the best free way to support me and to make sure that you see daily FaB gameplay in your video feed 5 days a week. The best paid way to support me is through Patreon, and a Patreon link is also in the video description. A Patreon subscription will get you access to the DFG Discord. At higher tiers, your name will appear in every DFG video. You'll get bonus DFG content every week, and there are even more benefits to come. Daily FaB gameplay will always be free 5 days a week, so for those who can afford to patronize me, I truly appreciate it. Let's talk about our sideboard plan and about the Kayo matchup. If you watched yesterday's calling recap, you know that I am on a slightly different list now from what you see in this video, but they aren't so different that we can't still learn from this game. In the Kayo Mirror, I really am a fan of Fiendal Spring Tunic. A lot of people will tell you play Hardened Crosstrap. It is much better defense against Scowling Fleshbag because you are not dependent on that second to last card in hand to play your Swing Big or CNC, whatever your remaining card is at the end of a big Blood Rush turn. You can just do it with Hardened Crosstrap. My answer to that is so many of our strong cards are 2 costs, and based on how Blood Rush turns can go, we usually find ourselves with a leftover resource so that we can pay to play a card from our hand or our arsenal with that Fiendal Spring Tunic rather than needing 2 full resources from Hardened Crosstrap. Additionally, with the amount of Go Again that we play in this list, or at least that I play in my list, the turn cycle of pitch a blue, play a wild ride, use Tunic, Mandible Claw is really good. And these games go long enough that we usually get to do it at least twice. If we can get 2 activations out of our Tunic, that is equal to the number of resources we gain from Hardened Crosstrap, and we also get an extra point of block value from the Tunic that the Crosstrap doesn't give us. So I am a big proponent of using Tunic in Brute mirrors, and even in the Kayo mirror, I think it's just a solid decision. But if you wanted to use Hardened Crosstrap, a lot of people would agree with you. There's nothing wrong with that. That just is my personal preference. For this game, we are playing sort of an older version of this list. That list does involve Humble. Humble is a super solid card in the Kayo mirror. No, it does not get a benefit from Blood Rush Bellow. That is a downside of the card, but being able to turn off Kayo's hero power can be very strong. You will get your turn cycles where the Kayo takes a little damage, plays a Swing Big for 8, then passes an Arsenal's card, but Humble does have the ability to affect Kayo's draw discard, as a humbled Kayo does not gain power on any of the 5 power attacks that he discards, which means that Pulping, Wild Ride, and Bare Fangs have a much higher chance to miss. Blood Rush Bellow may not work at all if the Kayo's hand is something like Blood Rush and 3 5-power blues. Cast Bones will very likely miss every time. It is extremely unlikely that a Kayo would have 6 natural 6 power attacks on top of the deck. And more than anything, even if the Kayo is hitting those discards, he is not making a might token because his hero power doesn't exist. So I think Humble is strong. I don't know if I would recommend it in the future. I am not currently playing it, as Peter Ward did not play it in his second place Pro Tour list. But Humble is really strong, and I think it's a lot stronger than people give it credit for. Overall game plan here is do to Kayo what he is trying to do to us, but better. These mirrors can usually come down to who played more Blood Rush Bellows or Cast Bones over the course of the game. Also comes down to who got the better flesh bag. And overall, I would say, in general, the player who flesh bags first will lose. That doesn't mean to hold your flesh bag in a situation where it's really good just because your opponent hasn't used their flesh bag yet. But usually skill in this matchup can be tracked by who is more patient with their flesh bag. Flesh bagging on a Cast Bones turn usually isn't a good idea. You might think, well, I'm stopping so much damage, but after that first attack, Kayo is just playing a normal turn where you probably wouldn't flesh bag. Flesh bag on the Blood Rush turn is usually much stronger, and you really want to look for where the Kayo maybe only has a card in arsenal and a card in hand and 1 resource floating, and they don't have Tunic or Cross Strap, and that's when you think, okay, we're preventing a lot of damage by flesh bagging away this last card in hand. It isn't always so obvious, but if you're looking for ways to improve your Kayo mirror matchup, and you very likely should be, Kayo is a winning deck, very popular, very well represented in the Pro Tour top 8. Better flesh bag usage is one of the first and most effective things you can work on. So that's sort of the general game plan. We're going to jump into the game now, and we will see how we can improve. We lose the die roll, and we are going to go first. We have a few options here on how we want to play out this turn. The most obvious line is to just discard Agile Windup, make an Agility, Arsenal Pulping, and pass. The reason I want to Arsenal the Pulping over something like Command and Conquer is that Pulping can't block. So if our opposing Kayo does put us in a position where we need to block a Send Packing or a Command and Conquer to protect our arsenal, I am much more interested in keeping a CNC that can block rather than keep a Pulping that can't. The other line we have for this turn is to discard Agile Windup, make our Might and our Agility, then play our Pulping, pitching our Assault and Battery to do so. The advantage of this is we are very likely getting 2 free damage because the Pulping is very likely to have Dominate and the Kayo won't be able to block it all out. The downside of this is it gives our opposing Kayo the opportunity to filter their hand. If they do have a bit of a clunker, maybe they do want that opportunity to block the Pulping. Overall, I think the 2 damage that we get from Pulping probably isn't worth giving Kayo the opportunity to filter. If we didn't have this Agile Windup, then I would be a lot more interested in playing the Pulping because I would want to make my Might token. But we're going to do that from discarding Windup anyway, so if I'm taking this turn now, I'm discarding Windup, making Might and Agility, and just passing the turn. The other disadvantage of playing our Pulping here is that we are at risk of discarding our Command and Conquer, which we would much rather keep than discard. So we do catch a lucky break, we are going to be able to arsenal this CNC rather than the blue Pound Town that we just drew and discarded. At the same time, if we had discarded our Command and Conquer and kept that blue Pound Town in hand, blue Pound Town is not what you want in Arsenal. You don't want any of your blues in your arsenal aside from a Reckless Swing. And even then, this early in the game, that can be pretty detrimental. So just one more disadvantage of playing that early Pulping. It paid off for us here, but if I'm making this call now, I am not playing Pulping this turn. We draw into a pretty hot hand, considering that we have a Command and Conquer in Arsenal, and we have an Agility. We can really look to high roll our opponent here with something like Command and Conquer from Arsenal, pitching a blue, Wild Ride from hand, pitching another blue. If we draw and discard whatever off the top of our deck and get to keep our swing big, that's a massive turn cycle. So I don't want to block here if I can avoid it. And Mandible Claw from 3 definitely is not something that's gonna make me block. Command and Conquer, on the other hand, is something I do need to deal with. I don't want to lose my CNC, and I don't want to take 6 damage from this Command and Conquer. So thinking about how we want to block this, unfortunately we are 1 turn off of being able to block with something like Assault and Battery Swing Big, and on our turn we Wild Ride Command and Conquer. So we can think about the easy block here is Assault and Battery Swing Big. On our turn, we very likely just Command and Conquer from Arsenal, pitching our Agile Windup, and then we Arsenal a Wild Ride. There's nothing wrong with that. Having Red Wild Ride in Arsenal is really, really nice. It lets us go 3 lengths wide in a turn cycle. It pairs very nicely with Blood Rush Bellow. Outside of that, if we chose to just take 6 here, then we are probably attacking with Swing Big, then we're attacking with Wild Ride, and then we're getting in with a Mandible Claw. Nothing wrong with that turn cycle either. That's a pretty good value. That's a 4-card 18, very likely. But I don't want to take damage. I do want to present disruption, and I do want to have a card in Arsenal. So I think the ideal line here is going to be blocking with Swing Big and Assault and Battery. On our turn, we just swing CNC for 7. We can look at whether we want to give up any armor here. We could block with Swing Big, Bone Breaker, and Scab Skin Leathers. On our turn, we CNC for 8 with Go Again. We play Wild Ride and then hope that we draw, discard something relevant. I suppose we would also just attack with Claw unless we flipped a Beast Within off the top of our deck. But that's pretty unlikely. But I don't mind sitting on armor here, so I think if I'm making this call now, it is just going to be blocked with Assault and Battery, Swing Big, protect our CNC, on our turn attack with our CNC, and then Arsenal a Wild Ride, and try to set up for the next 5-card hand. I think this is totally respectable. I think this is just a little higher risk. I don't like giving up armor this early because now we are not in a position to be able to protect against the next Command and Conquer or the next Send Packing. Now the advantage of attacking with CNC for 8 rather than CNC for 7 is that this is not easily covered by 1 card from hand and Bonebreaker Leathers. We're getting 3 pieces of equipment from Kayo and a card from hand. Fleshbag this early is fine, but it isn't great. How I want to respond to this Fleshbag is that I would like to discard my Agile Windup. And what discarding Agile Windup gets me is my agility, and it means that I get to keep my Wild Ride. For the Arsenal, if we don't wind up here and it gets banished by Intimidate, our turn basically ends. We could pitch the Wild Ride to attack with Claw, but then we get wind up back and we put it into our Arsenal, and we're really sad about having a 3-cost 5 in our Arsenal. If we discard the wind up, make our Might Agility, yeah, our turn ends, but we have a really solid card to put into our Arsenal That's going to work really well with our agility if we draw into another Command and Conquer or Humble or Swing Big. So when the Flesh Bag trigger goes on the stack, we can respond to that by discarding our windup, and I'm really hoping that that's what I do here. Okay, great. As I said, getting your opponent to Flesh Bag before you do is really nice. It takes a lot of pressure off of you, and they didn't get that much value from it. It was a 9-point Flesh Bag because we were not able to Wild Ride Claw, but at the same time, we got our Kayo trigger, we made an agility, and we got to arsenal the card without taking any kind of intellect penalty. That could have been a lot better for us, but it could have been a lot worse, so I'm really happy with the way that turn cycle went. We see that Kayo did want to keep that 4-card Blood Rush. 2 resources floating, 1 card in arsenal, but they don't have any agility. So the Claw coming in first means that we very likely just have 1 more attack to deal with this turn. We can just take this damage. We are definitely not blocking this Claw. We're not Flesh Bagging here. And depending on what the follow-up to the Claw is, we might not even be blocking. Now, unfortunately, the Wild Ride in our arsenal and the Pulping in our hand don't play well with Cast Bones. We could take a chance and do something like Wild Ride from arsenal, pitching our Agile Windup, drawing a card, and just hoping that we keep that 75% chance to not miss. At the same time, what I kind of like doing more is playing Send Packing over pitching by pitching Pulping and Agile Windup, then playing Cast Bones. If the Cast Bones misses the agility, we still have a Wild Ride in our arsenal, so we are going to get to go 3 links wide on our turn. All of this is to say that we're not going to block this Claw, and if the next attack is just damage with no on-hit, we're not going to block that either. Unfortunately, not meant to be. This is a Send Packing for 8. We cannot easily cover this damage because we blocked with our equipment on our last turn, rather than multiple cards from hand. If we still had Bonebreaker and Scabskins at full armor value, we could block this with Send Packing, Windup, and equipment. Then on our turn, we could pitch Pulping and use Tunic to attack with Claw, then play Cast Bones and arsenal a Wild Ride. We could pitch Pulping and Wild Ride to Claw, then play Cast Bones. We'd have a lot more options available to us. But because we don't have that armor available, we're in a bit of a tougher spot. So we could give Flesh Bag here, which I think is a really bad idea. We could block with Pulping, Cast Bones, Windup. On our turn, we probably just Tunic, pitch Pulping, Claw, and then arsenal our Wild Ride, but we aren't putting really any pressure onto our KO opponent. We can block with Send Packing, Cast Bones, and our remaining Battle Worn and Temper Armor. Cover up the 8. On our turn, we Wild Ride, pitching Windup, hope to keep our Pulping, and then we can use Tunic for Claw. And I think that's probably what I want to do here. I hate losing all of my armor this early, but we're at least doing something on our turn. And our opposing KO is churning through his armor too. So if I'm making this call now, it is going to be block with Send Packing, Cast Bones, and Bonebreaker Scabskins. Then on our turn, very likely throwing a Claw and arsenaling a Wild Ride. Throwing the Wild Ride and then either clawing or, I don't know, playing it. If we drew like a Command and Conquer and kept that would be pretty sweet. Going with the Pulping instead, totally defensible. it isn't like Kayo plays defense reactions. If they want to use a reckless swing and a card from hand to stop the dominate, great. Drawing into a Savage Feast is a little unfortunate. It is simultaneously the best and worst card in our deck. Savage Feast with agility is one of the best things that Kayo can do on a turn. Savage Feast without agility is just a really bad card. But we are going to arsenal it. We are going to hope for the best. Here, pretty good. We do want to block with the swing big. And we want to play E-Strike, bottom pulping, give it go again, and then play Cast Bones. I am not interested in blocking the Savage Feast. I'm interested in blocking what comes next, because if we put the swing big in front of Savage Feast, and then Kayo plays a Command and Conquer or a Send Packing, we're in a lot of trouble. Our hand doesn't block well because of our non-block pulping. So I do think that we should just take the Savage Feast damage. If the follow-up to this is a Mandible Claw, I think we take that too. Instead, it is just Command and Conquer. So glad we didn't block the Savage Feast. We're sad that we have to give up our E-Strike and Swing Big because we aren't going to be using the Might token on our turn, and we are going to take an Intellect penalty by keeping this pulping in hand, but at least we don't have to block with our Cast Bones, and at least we are going to get to do literal anything on our turn. I'm not super interested in protecting the Savage Feast. That isn't why I'm blocking here. It's more that I don't want to take 6. Also, I mean, just hit, right? If you're going to play Cast Bones, just hit. Our hand does not block at all. Opponent asking to undo, very likely just going to discard a windup at the end of the turn, but that's totally fine. I don't mind letting that happen. We are probably gonna do Flesh Bag. At the same time, our hand does now block. This is one of the strange nuances of Talishar, where if you play Cast Bones, roll a Scab Skins, do anything, any game action where something random happens, and it doesn't go the way you want, you roll a 1 on your Scab Skins, you undo, you roll Scab Skins, you're going to roll a 1 every time. We would have drawn that same hand from the top of our deck every time. But our opponent took a game action in between the Cast Bones and us ending our turn. So now our hand is different, which is just a very strange little quirk about playing on Talishar. Still in a position where it's pretty likely that I'm going to use Flesh Bag this turn. We have a massive turn lined up. We have this Beast within. We have multiple sources of draw discard. So if I can prematurely end Kayo's turn without taking too much damage, that's something I'm really interested in. At the same time, Kayo has a follow-up to this E-Strike, and we very likely are unable to prevent it with Flesh Bag. Now, if Kayo has something like a Swing Big and a blue, and we Flesh Bag away the Swing Big, that was good for us. But Kayo with 2 resources and Tunic can play any card in his deck. So I don't think that Flesh Bagging the E-Strike is correct. I think that Flesh Bagging the follow-up is going to be a lot better based on what Kayo does. So here, Claw for 5, I do want to Flesh Bag this, because taking a card out of Kayo's hand ends Kayo's turn. There is nothing effective that Kayo can do with a single resource, unless he's playing like Censor or something strange. But if we leave Kayo with 2 cards, this could be Command and Conquer, it could be Swing Big, it could be Send Packing, it could be anything. Deciding whether to block with the E-Strike here is an interesting question. I'm evaluating the top of the deck to figure it out. Very likely be E-Strike, draw a card to benefit from the go again, then play the Wild Ride from Arsenal, as opposed to something like Pulping or Wild Ride, which doesn't necessarily need the agility. Keeping in mind that we have Pulpings and Bear Fangs on top of our deck, I do think that keeping the E-Strike is a good call, and I want to open with E-Strike, draw a card. I think that is going to get us the most value for our agility. Oh, it's a Savage Feast. Never mind, this is great. Would I have blocked if I had properly remembered this was a Savage Feast? So we have this hand, it just doesn't have E-Strike in it. Okay, keeping in mind that that was a Savage Feast, I actually do think we should have blocked with the E-Strike to mitigate some damage. I think we just don't need the E-Strike. We have so much go again. But this is fine, honestly. We're going to play Red Pulping, we're going to pitch Reincarnate. We are going to be able to do something with the rest of our turn. It might be E-Strike for 7, it might be Bear Fangs, it might be another Pulping. We hope that things go okay. In this case, it is going to be E-Strike for 7. I guess the question I'm asking myself in that pause is it better to E-Strike for 7 or E-Strike for draw a card? But without knowing what's on the top of my deck, Kayo has some real clunkers. Any blue is going to be bad to put in our arsenal. Beast Within is a bad hit for the arsenal. We see that it would have been Beast Within in the arsenal, which of course we couldn't have known, but we can at least anticipate that it is an option. Our opponent really drawing the nuts with these Blood Rush Bellows. And here getting the Pulping from Arsenal under a Blood Rush is really not good for us. So we do want to block with the CNC to just sort of get block value where we can. We have kind of an unfortunate hand with 2 reds. The great news is our Tunic is going to be up, so even if we have to block with this Beast Within, we still get to throw a Bear Fangs for hopefully 8. Humble here, coming in for 6. We do need to take the Humble damage. We don't have a way around it. Well, we could block with Humble, Beast Within, and Tunic, and then do nothing on our turn except pass Arsenal of Bear Fangs and give our opponent all of the tempo, so I really don't want to do that. What could we do instead? We could take 6 and go to 4. On our turn, we could play Humble for 7 and Arsenal of Bear Fangs. We could block the Humble for 3 with our Beast Within, go to 7 on our turn. We use Tunic, we pitch Humble, and we play our Bear Fangs. We hope that we hit a natural 6 off the top of our deck and come in for 9. That's going to get a lot of blocks from Kayo. If if Bear Fangs only comes in for 7, then Kayo would need to give us a card from hand and 2 pieces of equipment, or 2 cards from hand. I think the best line here is going to be go to 4, send Humble for 7, and pass. But that is really tough. If I'm playing in the Pro Tour, if this is my win and I need to get to top 8 or the finals, or just winning the entire thing, I am blocking with Beast. Okay, I'm blocking with Beast Within. I'm going to 7. I'm using Tunic. I'm playing Bear Fangs. And I'm really hoping that I just hit off the top of my deck. think this is fine. I think getting the tunic value would have been a little better and staying at 7 as opposed to going to 6. Luckily, we do hit on the Bear Fangs, so we are still getting a lot of resources from Kayo. Unfortunately, they do get the trigger on Bonebreaker, but we are putting them to 2. We are putting them in reckless range, and we unfortunately are not going to get a lot of tempo this turn. We do need to block this Wild Ride, but we are setting ourselves up for success. We have Tunic, we have a Blood Rush, and we have 6 power attack to discard to the Blood Rush. So this is a pretty easy Blood Rush 3 block turn. We're just going to block for 6. Which blue we block with doesn't matter because the other one is going to get discarded to the Blood Rush. So we block for 6, we go to 4, and we play our Blood Rush, discarding our Pound Town, and just hoping for the best. We are not in a position where attacking for 5 is what I want to be doing. We are going to have 2 cards in hand after this Blood Rush, so even if we draw 2 reds and our turn is just pitch 2 reds to claw, we're still going for 5, but we're also making a might. So the, I don't know, quote-unquote safe line, the alternate line for this turn of using our Tunic and pitching our Blood Rush to play Pound Town is just objectively worse than doing this. The Blood Rush, all right, let's talk about what's happening here. I'm even going to turn off my webcam. Talishar lags, so I click through the Blood Rush priority to say, yes, I am willing to move forward. My browser does not recognize that that just happened, so I click pass again, which then jumps my client forward to moving to the end of my turn. That's a mistake. And so I am going to attempt to undo, as one does in the undo CCQ. And I am declined. Maybe my opponent got confused. Let's do it again. Declined. Let's invite to chat so that I can explain what's happening here. We'll give it some time, and we'll realize that our opponent is not going to allow this to happen. So now it's time to talk about online etiquette. If you're in the undo CCQ, allow your opponent to undo. That, to me, is the unspoken rule of undo CC. Yes, you have the opportunity to decline the undo request. It can happen. You might be in a situation where your opponent plays a Blood Rush Bellow, realizes that the 2 cards they draw were absolute garbage, and wants to undo the turn. Maybe that's what's happening here. But here's the thing, is that if I drew 2 reds, I can still just pitch to claw, right? That is an option I have available. Doing literal nothing on my turn with these 2 cards is impossible. There is no combination of cards that I could draw from my deck unless I was playing Gorganian Tome that cannot be pitched for me to do nothing on my turn. And even if I drew a Gorg Tome, I could play it, draw a card, and then pitch that card. I'm a big proponent of treating undo CC like a substitute for paper practice. I can't always make it to my LGS, my friends aren't always available, so sometimes I do just play on Talishar, and that's how I get reps. So I'm totally down with, hey, let's treat it like a competitive rule enforcement level event. But even at a comp REL event, your opponent cannot pass through their action phase unintentionally. The only way for them to do that is if they had a stroke. And if your opponent had a stroke, you should still call a judge because they're in trouble. So this not letting me undo what was clearly a mistake, what could not happen in paper, is so bizarre to me that you want to win this game so much that you're going to put me into a corner based on something that could not happen in paper play. It's so bizarre to me. But we are going to move forward because the actual line here would be play agile windup for 8, which is going to take 3 cards out of my opponent's hand and put them into a position where their best line is claw for 4 and their maybe likely line, if they draw a red non-block, is to pass the turn. So I'm sorry to go on this tangent. I just want to really emphasize this is not a cool thing to do on Talent Chart, even in Undo CC. The Undo CC cue to me represents, we very likely win this game based on the fact that our opponent had a red non-block in hand. Anyway, to me, Undo CC represents this is the competitive cue. This is the cue that I play in when I am practicing for something, when I care, where I am confident in my deck that I am not going to need to undo every turn based on learning the deck. So if you don't let your opponent undo in Undo CC, to me, I mean, what are we even doing here? Especially if it's something that could not happen in paper play. By the way, disabling stacks means that if you lose a game or win a game, that won't affect your deck result on Talent Chart. We block for 6, we go to 3, we are at least going to get to CNC for 7. I can understand throwing 7 power and clearing the arsenal of a bad card. I do think that CNC to get a 3rd card out of our opponent's hand is better. That we are going to find ourselves in a position where our best line is still just to block a ton. And then throw a 3 for 6 from our arsenal. So here we do need to block. This pulping is going to put us to 1, thinking about how we want to play out our turn. We are just going to E-strike for 5 go again, play Command and Conquer, and that means we're blocking this with Savage Feast and Fiandal Spring Tunic. There really is not a better line based on how low we are on life. If we could take this pulping damage, then maybe we would have something else to do, something else to talk about. But as it is, we are just going to E-strike for 5 go again, CNC for 6. We are playing towards Reckless Swing at this point. There is nothing we can do if our opponent has Reckless Swing, so let's just play as if they had it. Maybe we get lucky here, and they have a wind-up or a non-block in hand, and they're dead to Command and Conquer. No such luck. They do live, but we do strip the hand. Here we find our Reckless Swing. Again, we're in a position where we just have to hope they don't have it. What I would like to do with this hand, what I'm going to do is roll Scabs and hopefully get a 1 so that I have an excuse for making a bad play, essentially just ending my turn. If I pass my turn and do nothing, it's pretty obvious that our opponent knows what we have. What we could also do instead of rolling Scabs is just play Wind Up and pitch Beast Within Pulping. Unfortunately, rolling a 6 means that we really don't have a good excuse for why we would do nothing on our turn. I do think Beast Within pitch 2 yellows is the right play. It looks a little less suspicious. But we can also just claw, discard, wind up. We are hoping to survive this turn and then win with Reckless Swing. The cards that we draw don't matter. None of them are non-attack actions. None of them are misses for Reckless Swing. We're going to turn stats back on now that we are going to win this game. Yeah, this is fine. And then we Reckless Swing and win the game. So, super close KO mirror. I do think there were a lot of things to talk about, a lot of decision points. where we may have made suboptimal plays based on how to move the game forward. What I really did want to talk about, even as this game was happening, was online etiquette, how to play in the undue CCQ. We're all there to practice. Why would you want to win a suboptimal game? Why would you want to benefit from your opponent messing up in a low-stakes setting when you should be looking to get better practice for high-stakes settings? So hopefully, if you are in the undue CCQ, I have shed some light, at least on my personal thoughts about it. But overall, I do hope you enjoyed this game. I do hope you learned something. If so, salt and batter that like button. My comments are always open for any questions or feedback. Again, if you've not already done so, please consider a YouTube subscription. It's free, it helps me out, but no matter what you do, I will see you back here tomorrow for more daily FaB gameplay. And until then, take care.